Hi there, thanks for joining again. This time we're gonna paint this colorful picture, and a very nice and fun way to start a painting is with a underpainting, a grisaille. And a grisaille means an underpainting in only black and white and grayscale. Now we only need titanium white and lamp black in this case, and you will find a reference photo of the sketch as well. I'll take the picture straight away. And now the first thing I'm gonna do is search for the darkest value that I can find. I think it's rather obvious. You have a dark hole here, this is a little bit dark. Here the inside of the car. Here are very dark parts. And the cast shadow under the car, underneath the car is also very dark. Here in the tree a little bit dark. So that's all rather dark. But is it pitch black? Let's take a look. No. So a little touch of white. Yeah, that's good enough. By the way, I need to tell you that it also depends a little bit on what your printer does, of course. If your printer prints it a little bit darker, yeah, then everything might be a little bit different. So at this stage I grab a round brush for these rather detailed parts. I can paint this rather dark. And then the tire itself is way lighter already. So it's just a matter of painting around the tire. When you squint your eyes a little bit, you can see that this shadow here on that tire makes this part of the tire also rather dark. It's almost as dark as the shadow that's behind there, I think. So I'll put that together like this. And yeah, I leave it like that. Here it gets rather dark as well, but I'll go there shortly. Like this. And maybe here a little bit behind that thing over there. Well, this is a little bit lighter, so I'll leave the rest. But then of course here. This is rather dark. The inside of the car is slightly light. What I do now is I just adjust this dark color a little bit with a little bit white. So I get a slightly lighter tonal value. And I grab a piece of paper. So like this. And I put the paint on the edge of the paper. And now I'm comparing this value to the value that I see over there. Does it match? Yes. You can clearly see that this tonal value is correct here, but mainly for the part that I checked, and that was this dark part here. And the same value I can take for this inner part here. Here, the top of the back seat is a little bit lighter again, so just the back seat itself gets a little bit darker again, almost as dark as this, and this is the same darkness as that. So yeah, I think I just take these two together. That doesn't matter that much. And then this part gets slightly lighter in between there, so I'll just add a little touch of white to make that slightly lighter. The tire. Here is this very dark part, and then it gets slightly lighter. So I take the darkest part that I had, darkest bit of paint, and I make it slightly lighter with the lighter variation that I already had, and I can compare again. So on the back side of the paper I compare. It's quite good. From here it gets a little bit lighter, but it is very, very subtle. And then already we see that it gets even lighter, you see? But that I will do shortly. First I'm gonna look over here. This is also very dark, but not as dark as that black part that I did there. Or that's almost black, but you see, so I just look at it a little bit locally more now. And here it gets slightly lighter, so I'll add a little bit more of white. See, it's ever so slightly, you will hardly notice it maybe, but it is there. Here, this part of the tire is even lighter. Adjust it a little bit, make it slightly lighter with a little bit of white, and I'm gonna compare. It looks rather light, but still it is quite a dark color. And it looks though that is even lighter. Yeah, that's a little bit lighter still. Here. You see, over here. Now I want to head over to the, how do you call it, the cast shadow. And here it's rather dark. It's almost as dark as that. So I have taken this color, I still have this value, and I've made it slightly lighter, but ever so slightly, because it is darker than this side of the tire. You see, this is darker than that. All of the time, that's the game of tonal values. Yeah? If I've made this too light, then maybe I make the cast shadow underneath the car too light as well. It's all connected to each other in one way or another. So here we go. First I'll do this rather dark part. There at the edges it gets slightly lighter, so let's first do this until I meet that rear tire. So over here. Now let's make it slightly lighter at the edges. So I'll add a tiny bit of white. The edge of the cast shadow is slightly lighter. And same goes for this side of the cast shadow. See? Here I'll take the cast shadow through underneath the tire. Here the cast shadow gets way lighter. And I compare, yep, that's good. But then, rather quickly, it gets even lighter, you see? Yeah, it dissolves a little bit in the color of the tarmac. See, are we close? Yes, we're rather close, a little bit lighter. So, like that. Okay, I don't have that much of a plan, as you can see. I'm just jumping around in the picture, and it doesn't matter that much what you do. By the way, I make that dark value slightly lighter, as promised, for this broken thing over there. I don't even know what it is. It looks like a sort of electricity, or what is it? Electricity cabinet or something. I don't know, but it looks a little bit broken. This tire, slightly lighter than the shadow that we've already painted. That's the first thing I'm gonna do. So I drop it in like this. And here it gets slightly lighter because it bends inwards a little bit. So I'll leave a little bit of room there. And at the outside here, it seems that it gets a little bit lighter as well. So I'll adjust that a little bit here. It might get a little bit darker. But first let me put this. Then I'm gonna make this slightly lighter stuff. It's just a little bit lighter value over here. See, it's ever so slightly. And the same goes for this here. There's a small edge that's a little bit light. And there it gets darker again. Now let's take a look at some other parts that might be dark. Here in the tree, for example. I do it a little bit like this, because the fun thing is with these things like foliage and stuff like that, you see in the background you have dark leaves, because they're in the shadow, and these lighter leaves overlap these darker parts. So The plan in this case is just building a little bit of dark leaf, just doing things like this, a little bit in that pattern, and well, at some spots here for instance I just make a dark place, a lot of dark. I can put the lighter parts on top of it later, and I don't want to paint every leaf exactly as it is. That's boring and it's no use as well because it's background work. It's also handy to have dark stuff over here, but here we have to keep it a little bit open, because we want to see the wall. The shadow here in the door is a little bit lighter, so I grab this one. It's slightly lighter. That's the door. It has a rather dark shadow here. The lower we get, the lighter that value becomes. So I make it slightly lighter. And of course it's also all a matter of how precise do you want to be. I don't want to be too precise, that doesn't matter too much, but a little bit of the information on the photo I think is fun to use. So here I make it slightly lighter than there. That gives it maybe more of a realistic impression. Here it's slightly dark, and these shadows here, well, I'll do them a little bit, well, not too dark. See, it's getting a little bit more towards middle gray, so to speak. So, and of course it's also handy to draw these in for this kind of landmarks. Here, this is a little bit lighter again, so like this. We want to keep it a little bit playful maybe. Of course we have that roof, and that looks a little bit dark gray, so I'll just check. I'll make this a little bit lighter because it isn't pitch black. I put it on the edge of a paper and you see I'm getting rather close. Maybe slightly lighter. So I add a little bit more white. I compare again because maybe I'm going in the wrong direction. No, this is good. So let's put this on the roof. Here at the edge it's darker, but still it isn't black, so slightly darker here in front and here at the back, but don't drop in a black line here because it isn't black. Now I'm gonna look at these other lines. So I'll just throw in these lines a little bit. This door, how dark is that? Let us check with the color checker, with the tonal value tonal value finder. It's about middle gray. So let's say, because this is a bigger plane to paint, I'm gonna mix a little bit more paint. So I'll grab all this gray stuff, make it lighter with a little bit of white. So let's take a look. Is that good? It's a little bit too dark. Yeah, you see it's also darker than middle gray. So I need to add slightly more white. I keep a little bit of that darker stuff, maybe for some shadows. Big brush, because we want that to do quickly. So again, here you see some foliage on top of that, but we can do that later. Then I want to make some variations because you have a little bit of light and dark. So I'll grab a little bit of white and then make this slightly lighter. You see, and now I start making a little bit of these horizontal strokes. I don't want to be too precise, so I'm not counting all those things, but I just indicate a little bit. And I grab a little bit of this darker stuff that I've kept. And now I do my brush perpendicular to the canvas, like this. and I make some straight strokes like this. Let's mix all this stuff together. And now I add more white. See, yeah, that's good. Okay. Okay, and now I have a little bit of a small brush, but okay, who cares? And here in reality there it's slightly darker, yeah, on top behind that tree, so I can do that shortly. But now let me fill this. Should have taken a big brush. This is a little bit silly. You see, with a small brush it takes forever to fill this spot. Sometimes that's the way it goes. And we can do a little bit like this. Oh yeah, see, look at this. Watch this. When we go up here, now I'm gonna add more of the dark stuff. Oh, by the way, that needs to be lighter, of course. Here I get slightly darker. So I take a little bit more gray. You see here behind, in between the leaves, a little bit of this. And again, later on, we're gonna cover that. We build that on top of this. So that's nice, and slightly darker here to make this stain on the wall. You see, so I just take a slightly darker color and just wipe that wet and wet a little bit in that pattern that I see. That's good enough. So you hardly see it, but to be honest, you also hardly see it over there. So that's good. And here is also a little bit of shadow. It's a little bit darker than the wall itself. So I just grab a little bit of gray that's slightly darker. See, there we go. It's not a black dark line. Here it is rather dark. Over here, slightly darker. So I just drop this in here and I drop this in here. You see? And here is a little part that's a little bit darker. Here maybe as well. Here on this stone. Okay, and then it gets slightly lighter. So I take a little bit of white, ever so slightly, and make that tonal value slightly lighter. But it's very, very slightly lighter. You see, it's hardly a difference. And that helps to make it look old. As sometimes we tend to think, oh, this is very dark, that is very light. No, these changes are very subtle. And here it gets almost as dark as the rest of the wall to the right. So there we go. So there we go. Due to the lighting conditions, you see that there's a little bit of a shadow there and a little bit of shadow here. That's good enough. And then here it gets a little bit lighter again. So you see, and here is a rather light part at the side. So you see, and the same goes for here. It is not pure white, but it is very close to white. So you can check. Yeah, even lighter. So there we go. So this side catches light. Now these panels over here, it's rather a middle kind of gray. So I grab all the gray paint that I have. So I mix it. I need more, by the way. So now, because I see differences, here it's a little bit darker. This is suitable for here. Here this is a little bit too dark for there. But so I just keep this dark tonal value and I make a new one next to it that's slightly lighter. We can play a little bit with dark and light. That's easy. So I'll show you. I'll grab a big brush. It's easiest, I think, if I just drop in this color first, like this, and then later on I'll sketch these darker lines on top of it. Now grab a little bit of that dark value and indicate the panels of the door again, you see? Like this. There we go. This is all a little bit dark here. It's more in the shadow. So just hold the brush perpendicular for this upright line like this. So then here as well we have a slightly darker line. I don't want to do all the details, so I do it a little bit freely, if you don't mind. It's just background work. See, so here we go. I'll fill in these panels a little bit with the lighter value. I just grabbed the lighter value, slightly lighter value. And for instance this, you see, when I do this, I'll just do it like this. Sometimes I also destroy what I've already done. That's not that big of a deal. We can always restore it. Here we go again. So, like this. Now we can add a little bit of detail. I'll grab a little bit of a darker value, slightly darker. And I restore a little bit of the shadows. Ooh, that's a little bit too dark. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a little bit too dark. Okay. So like this, that's better. You see? Now when you paint wet and wet, gets a little bit nice soft effect. So a little bit to indicate these panels. We can also adjust, I'll take a little bit of white to make some things a little bit lighter. So, on top of this, for instance, you see, and here a little bit, it's ever so slightly, and I just wipe it in a little bit in the direction of the wood, so to speak. It's ever so slightly. Now I'm gonna focus on this. So, and we know it is white paint, of course, but you see, it doesn't show as white paint. So I just add a little bit of black. I'll have to be very careful. That's already a little bit too much, I'm afraid. Then I take a little bit more white. That's good. So that's good for this tonal value. And this one, it looks as though it is slightly darker. So maybe this darker version that I have already made, yeah, that's great for here. And here it changes a little bit. But that doesn't matter that much. Now, let us make a tonal value for this wall straight away as well. So it's darker than that light value, so I add slightly more black. So that's the way to go about it. You constantly compare, okay, I look at this, is this darker than that? Is this lighter than that? Stuff like that, that can really help. So, and now it's time to start painting. Small adjustments I can do on the fly. There we go. Let me first do that light part. So over here. You see, that is lighter than my canvas. My canvas was kind of gray tone. Clean the brush a little bit and I go over to this one. that was the yellow over there. So you see, it's almost the same as my canvas. This is slightly darker, so I just grab this one. It is lighter than the panels of the doors, you see, so it's almost the color of my canvas. And here it even gets slightly darker. So I'll just grab a little bit of black and wipe that through the wet paint. Now let's head over to that yellow wall. That's a little bit like this, so it's almost the same color as my canvas. Slightly darker, but ever so slightly. And there is that panel that's hanging loose. So I do it like this, and there you see it gets a little bit darker, of course, due to the cast shadow of that panel. So I'll add a slight touch of cast shadow. Maybe a little bit too dark. So here I add a little bit of darker color, you see, for that cast shadow. And by the way, here it is darker as well because of the chipped paint on the wall. You see, here as well, this part is almost as dark as the panels of the doors. So that's another, again, it's a reference that I can use here as well. These concrete parts that you can see are almost, this is slightly lighter again, but these two are almost as dark as the panels. So, and the surrounding is slightly lighter, so I just take the yellow that I used there is almost the good tonal value for this. You see? Then it gets lighter there when we go down. Here underneath, here at the bottom, we have slightly darker parts, but still it's not black. And here is a crack in the wall. I'll do that slightly dark like this. But this I don't care that much for the exact tonal values, because it is scenery. And but what I do want to point out is that although it is only scenery and I don't care about the exact tonal values all the way here, I do care about the effect of that, chipped paint. And I do look at the total picture. Is there a lot of contrast in this area? No, there isn't. If you squint your eyes, that's a good way to observe how big the contrasts are. Then you see the contrasts are relatively small. Here, this is slightly lighter on top of this. A little bit of that paint. And here a little bit. But you see, the rest, I just leave it a little bit like this. There we go. This is slightly lighter than the yellow wall that's above it, so I add more white to it, you see? So this is slightly lighter than that. And then that loose hanging panel, I grabbed the same color as I had for the wall. And so that's rather good. There we go. So there we go. This one. Now here, staircase. And then it gets slightly darker. So I'll grab a little bit of black and adjust it a little bit. And then I mix it and I check. Yeah, that's good. So you see, small adjustments I can do. I don't need to grab the palette knife because I only use a little bit of paint. I do it a little bit loosely over here. Here where the tree is in that hole is a little bit darker. See? Over here. And this is definitely almost as dark as this tire, so that is rather dark, that the side of the pavement over there. So not as dark as the tire itself over there, but here it's rather dark, so I'll add a little bit more black. And there it gets slightly lighter, but again, still, although we see a little bit of yellow, it is rather a dark tonal value. And then on top there, the pavement gets slightly lighter. But, well, that doesn't matter that much. And the pavement over here is slightly lighter again, so I grab this light tonal value, put it on the edge of the paper, and I compare, and that is rather good for the most parts. So I just use this, slightly lighter. I'm not gonna paint every brick that I see on the pavement, I just do like this. And then again, very dark side of the pavement here, that line. That's over here. Over here I add slightly more black. Maybe it's a little bit too dark. And the top of the side here is slightly darker as well. No, that's a little bit too much. There we go. Then let us do the tarmac. And here again, a funny thing is these lines of the parking space. We see a line and we could be tempted to paint it way too dark, but if you squint your eyes, you hardly see the lines. So that means the contrast in tonal values is very small. And that's a different thing than this part on the pavement here, the side of the pavement, that's way darker than the top of the pavement, you see? This is almost as dark as this, even though we know it is a light line. Constantly check yourself, and you don't have to do this the rest of your painting career. That constant checking yourself. And but as you can imagine, as your experience in painting grows and you've checked yourself in the beginnings a lot of the times, then chances are that you start judging tonal values way better along the way. So then you can just jump in and, well, maybe sometimes you're slightly off, but not that much as you would be when you would be a total beginner in painting, because beginners in painting and in drawing, just make a lot of mistakes in judging tonal values, and that is nothing to be ashamed of. It's very normal. Everyone does that. It's most of the time, most people do that. And that's just because that is a very difficult part of painting and drawing. Our mind gets fooled very easily by what we think we see and how we perceive things when we see them in context. This part of the line I see, so up till here, is slightly lighter than the pavement, than the tarmac. Here it gets darker, that line, so closer to the values of the tarmac and the cast shadow here. Slightly lighter. So the whole point of this is too light, you see, but I need a smaller brush because it is a little bit difficult to paint over there. So I'll add more black here to make this slightly darker, but not darker than the cast shadow and the asphalt, the tarmac. So you see. Now we head over to that tree over there See, that's a rather dark gray. So let me check. Is it something like this? It's a little bit lighter. And that's over here, the shadow of the stem. And when we get down here, it gets slightly lighter. So I add a little bit more of white and I check the value again. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so there we go. So this is only, and it changes because to the left it is slightly lighter and to the right it is slightly lighter, as you can see. And down here we have this hole. So there, that's this tonal value, and you see that this part here is almost the same tonal value, and it goes up like this a little bit, and from here it changes value, it becomes slightly lighter again. So there we go. It is a little bit darker than the background, but not that much. So this is a little bit too much, but here at this part here in the center, you see the darkest part on the tree. So this line, and then at the sides it gets slightly lighter because of reflected light, light bouncing from all sides, and that kind of stuff. So there. And at this side, this part is also, but it contains a lot of color, so it's a little bit difficult to judge. So again, just put it on the edge of a paper. And now this is not that good. Like this. Is this the tonal value that I'm looking for? Yes, it is. So there we go. So it merges a little bit with the background, slightly. You see? Well, there. Here it gets slightly darker again. There we go. So you see everything starts working together now a little bit. The sign I can do now as well. So this is lighter, but slightly darker than the sign itself, the background plate. So I'll do it like this. See? And the plate itself here is a little bit too much exaggerated, so I'll drop this down like this. So there we go. Okay, so now we can, I think the background work is good enough, but maybe a little bit of this we can put a little bit of these indications over here, but again, this line that I just put here is not black, and you see that going down it gets slightly lighter. Even it is a little bit darker than the stones, so slightly, but not that much. And the same goes for this one, it is slightly darker than the stones, so keep that in mind. And if you do that, then you get realism. And again, it even doesn't have to be completely perfect, but it's always better than when you would have put a dark black line over there. Then it would have looked unrealistically. Here as well, here you see a slightly darker part here, there, but going up it gets lighter. And here we see some things in the stones. Okay, that's not that important at this stage. We can do that when we head over to color. Here on the door is a little part that's a little bit darker as well. I like to put that in as well, you see. Oh, the foliage here on the tree I won't do in the grayscale. It's easier to fill in the background later on with color, and then go over it with these foliage, with the flowers and the foliage. Now let's head over to the car, this windscreen. What kind of tonal value is that? It's almost the same as this. We color it in like this. if you look globally to the car, you could say it has, generally speaking, sort of three main tonal values. Rather dark, a little bit lighter on the top of the roof here, and reasonably light. So those are the three main tonal values to think about. Let me first make a rather dark tonal value for the darkest parts in the car. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so for the darkest parts, still rather dark. I guess it's almost the same color of the same tonal value as that yellow, about. That's what I'm guessing, but not sure. Always try and compare. And then also we have parts a little bit even lighter. So let me add more white to this mixture. So you see, this is definitely not white. Even though this is a highlight, it still contains quite a bit of gray if you compare it to the pure titanium white. So that's that. And I also want a tonal value that's slightly lighter than this one. So a little bit of white again, and I just split. I keep that one for the biggest parts, and this one is slightly lighter, and I think that's enough to start painting the tonal values of the car. I'm gonna take a rather big brush, and I start with that darkest value. And yeah, I see it over here. Maybe it's getting a little bit hard with this brush, but I'm gonna try. Here, in the sketch, I have indicated the parts where it gets lighter and where it is darker, you see. So, there we go. Well, I just need a little smaller brush, a round brush. This is a little bit difficult. There we go, here, down there. This can be slightly darker, even, because it's more in the shadow. Then we get this line. That's also this tonal value, you see. And here it gets slightly lighter on top. So I wipe the brush clean a little bit, you see here. This one. So then I take that slightly lighter one and I just drop that in over here. See? But ever so slightly. You hardly see it, and that's good because here you also hardly see it. And the same goes for the part here where it turns toward that lighter version. So there we go. Then I get back to that dark one again, and I just choose to make this the same tonal value as this. It is slightly lighter, but I can simplify as painter a little bit. There we go. Here it might get easier to use the big brush. Well, the door handle, we can do that later on. I keep it a little bit. Then we go over here. And here again it gets, here on top of it, it gets lighter, of course. And then I do this one, the big plane. And I leave a little bit of room there because I want to add a little bit of the lighter paint later on, you see? Now, because I add that slightly darker paint, I'll show you in a minute, sorry. Because now I've added that little darker paint at the edges here, I see that this can be slightly lighter. Ever so slightly. See, like that. But now we get a little bit of three-dimensionality in there, you see? And that just happens. And that's the fun thing when you work with tonal values, when you focus on tonal values, the painting comes alive automatically. It automatically becomes three-dimensional. So this I can simplify. I can do this all with this rather dark value over here, and I can add details later on as much as I like. Oh, well, I add a little bit of black, turning away here around the bumper. The back side is slightly darker, and then again I add the regular tonal value. There we go. Grab the big brush again because this is a big plane. It's easier this way. There we go. And now you see, here is a slightly darker part, but ever so slightly. So I'll just drop in a little bit of a darker gray here. But it's ever so slightly. You can hardly believe that that will work, but it does. And then on top of this, here, it gets slightly lighter. So I wipe off the brush a little bit and I get that slightly lighter tonal value over here, see? So this back side, that more orangey color. And there. I continue here with that slightly lighter color. That's enough. Here is rather light, there I'll use this one, but over here it gets slightly lighter. See, like this. So there we go. Because I've used this tonal value and I want to mix it a little bit with the previous one, I just mix these two tonal values together a little bit. So I have this value, and I've mixed them together. Then I have a tonal value in between. So now I can easily blend these two tonal values, you see? So like this. This darker value I also can use for this part, of course. So I continue here. And we see all kinds of details over there. Don't mind that. Just drop in the base color. Here it gets slightly lighter, so I grab the slightly lighter variation, this one. There we go. And then I connect this with that. This darker version I also need over here a little bit, and then surrounded by the lighter version. Here we can do a light accent later on. So this, you see, till over here, and then it gets really light. But now this, there it bends inwards, so that dark value I adjust by adding a little bit more black, and then I do it like this. And now I've made a mistake there with the cast shadow. You see here on the photograph that you see a stroke of tarmac that's not in the cast shadow. So I have to add that to make it more logical. So, okay, now let's focus on the light parts. And now I like to work from the lightest light towards the darker parts that we have. So I just first grab this lightest light, so we can search for, okay, here on the windscreen there's a light part there, and or maybe there. Here at the sides, this can be made very light, almost white, but still it contains color. So you see, it's just fun. Then I head back to that that lightest color. This thing is rather light, and here on the bumper, there, and on the roof we see a very light part here and here at the back. But you see that now looks just like a line, and I want to connect it with the rest of the roof, so I'll add a darker tonal value at the side, and I blend it a little bit. You see, now it gets connected. Then here it's also very, very light, this part. So let us see, it's over here up till here. From here on it gets a little bit darker here when it goes down like this. Here it's slightly darker. So add a little bit more gray, see? Here on top you see that it dissolves in the surrounding color of the roof. So there I need to make it rather dark. This is also very light. Maybe I add a little bit of extra white. Here as well you have very light parts, and after that I'm gonna connect these light parts again with the darker parts. So now I get to this slightly darker. Well, we have that color over here, for instance, and it goes down like this towards that light that I already did. Now, this looks a little bit like a hard line, so I want to connect it a little bit. I try to connect it with the values that surround it a little bit. Not too much, a little bit. We don't have to overblend, but you see what happens. Here, this part gets a little bit darker. So I do it like that. See, so now the gray of my canvas comes shining through, and you see that is too dark. Too light. So now I'm adding more of a slightly darker value, and now it starts making sense. There we go. Voila, then this one. You see the contrast between the values gets smaller when I add this value. And in fact that's exactly what we needed. Rear bumper has got a darker part here. Then it quickly becomes very light here. Very, very light. And then it turns away and it becomes slightly darker again. So, and I guess that's enough to indicate that part. We don't have to do all the tiny details. So, like that. The handle, the door handle over here. I just keep it fairly simple, you see. Let's restore these lines a little bit when necessary. And there you see also a slightly darker line accompanied by a slightly lighter line where the light hits. So you have this at the edge as well. If you like, over here, lighter part. Let's finish the bonnet here. That needs a little bit of light value still there. It almost dissolves in the background. See? This part is rather kind of shadowy. And it's rather dark, you see? Like this. There it gets slightly lighter. So I grab a lighter paint and I just drop it in like this. And there is the lightest part, so I'll add even more light. Not pure white, but a little bit lighter, you see. So I simplify this whole part. I see all kinds of lines and things. But let's just keep it simple first. And then later on, look, you can always add these lines if you like. That's no problem. So here, for instance, I can add a little bit of the illusion of a line over there and over here. But, well, maybe at this stage I don't want to do that. That white line, that light line that we see, is also, this is lighter than this, but there it is darker. So maybe a little bit like this. And then we need to do that other one as well. That's more, well, you see a little bit more of shadow in this part, I would say. This is dark. Oops, I was a bit sloppy. Then we have slightly lighter up till here, I think, if I see it correctly. And from there on it gets lighter. So there we go. But slightly. See? So then, and you think of the big form. These lines, forget about them at this stage. No, that's no use thinking about all these lines. Now I need to do this light line again. I'm trying to do my best. It's a little bit darker. So you see. So now we finished our grisaille, our black and white underpainting. In the next video I'll show you how you can paint with color on top of this layer. So have fun painting, see you next time.